Open this public hearing of the Agriculture Committee's inquiry into the role of Australian agriculture in Southeast Asian markets. In accordance with the Committee's resolution of the 22nd of August 2022, this hearing will be broadcast on the Parliament's website and the proof and official transcripts of the proceedings will be published on the Parliament's website. Filming and recording by the media are permitted during this hearing, and I remind members of the media who may be present or listening on the web of the need to fairly and accurately report the proceedings of the committee. I now welcome representatives of the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research to give evidence today. For the Hansard record, would you please state your names and the capacity in which you appear before the committee?
I'm Professor Wendy Umberger. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research.
Good morning, my name is Laura Timmins. I'm the General Manager of Partnerships for the Australian Centre of International Agricultural Research.
Morning, David Shearer, Strategic Advisor, Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research.
Thank you very much. This hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. And normally at this point, I would invite the committee to introduce themselves to you. However, I think given that we do have some slight issues, we will leave that today. You can see that we have Mr Matt Burnell coming to us from South Australia and Mr Brian Mitchell, MP, both MPs coming from Mr Mitchell coming from Tasmania. I'm coming to you from the Hunter region. I welcome you and invite you to make a brief opening statement before we proceed to members' questions.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to provide evidence at the inquiry here today. As I said, I'm the Chief Executive Officer, Wendy Umberger, and I have on my left Ms. Laura Timmins, our General Manager of Partnerships, and on my right, Mr. David Shearer, who is our Strategic Advisor for our agency. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples as the traditional custodians of this land and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and future. As I said, we're very pleased to have the opportunity to contribute to this important inquiry. For context, I thought it would be useful to provide a little bit of background about the agency that we have the opportunity to represent today, the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research, or as people that work with us call us, ACR. We are a small statutory agency. We were established 42 years ago in 1982. We're within the Australian government's Foreign Affairs and Trade portfolio. As CEO, I report directly to the Foreign Minister. We have a very unique role in development assistance. We broker, facilitate, and invest in research and capacity development partnerships. Our projects and programs address issues in the agriculture value chain, aiming to increase agricultural productivity, improve food security, reduce poverty, and enhance environmental sustainability in our partner countries throughout the Indo-Pacific. Our projects are across all sectors of agriculture, as well as fisheries and forestry. ACR brings together the very best of Australian agriculture research expertise and partner country researchers to work together to find solutions in a very changing and dynamic world. The work we do includes capacity development of all individuals in the value chain that participate in our projects, both our overseas partners and our Australian participants. This might be smallholder farmers, traders, processors, marketers, researchers, and policymakers. We're actively involved in 33 countries in the region. But with respect to Southeast Asia, we have offices located in Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Myanmar, the Philippines, Timor-Leste, and Vietnam. Our overseas teams are in the Australian embassies, and they're locally engaged staff, meaning people who are usually citizens of the country in which we're working in. Those individuals, our staff in those countries, are very connected with the agri-food sector, not just research agencies, but also policymakers and the private sector involved in the agri-food industry. ACR-supported research and capacity development programs contribute significantly to our international development policy. We enhance the livelihoods of everyone involved in the agri-food system, as well as the institutions in our partner countries. A distinguishing feature of our commissioning model is the high level of partnership, including shared funding between governments of other countries and the Australian government, as well as the private sector, and very high levels of collaboration. Although I've just been the CEO for about 14 months, I was also, before I took on this role, I was a professor of agricultural economics and started the agribusiness program at the University of Adelaide. I myself have been very involved in the agriculture sector in Australia and globally and have a very strong understanding. I can personally attest that there are multiple benefits back to Australia, including the evolving research partnerships, the economic development of trading partners, biosecurity preparedness, genetics resources, and innovation. Also, market awareness and information, not just about our agricultural products, but also about services that our agri-food sector from Australia can offer. Our work in Southeast Asia complements Australia's trade ambitions by providing highly sought-after cooperation and capacity building in agriculture. We've built significant individual and institutional capacity to enable ongoing capability to meet emerging challenges in our countries and in our regions. Extensive and deep partnerships brokered by ACR have been formed within the research ecosystem and policy ecosystem of partner countries, as well as Australia. Those partners have become very important allies of Australia, with many people that we've worked with now becoming senior leaders of key institutions in our overseas partner countries. I'd like to conclude my initial comments by emphasizing ACR's role in complementing work on trade and agriculture through developing close partnerships, building strong capacity, and ensuring the research we commission addresses the requests of our partners, or in other words, locally led, and also addresses Australia's comparative advantage in agriculture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. That was very comprehensive, and I would just note also that Dr. Mike Freelander, who will be coming into us from Western Sydney, has joined the hearing as well. Welcome, Mike. Nice to see you.
Thanks very much.
I'm having camera issues. I promise I have brushed my hair and am dressed appropriately. I just can't get my camera to work. So, Professor, if I could just kick off some questions before I hand over to some of my colleagues. Very interested in your relationship and how ACR works. We've heard really consistent and positive feedback and reports on the counsellors network internationally. Now, they're obviously run through the Department of Agriculture and various other research bodies. Do you work closely with those counsellors? I'm just wondering what the interface is for ACR with some of the other outreach that we do as a nation in the agricultural international trade space.
Yes, we do work closely with the ag counsellors, and not just the ag counsellors at Post, but also all of Australia that's at Post and also back in Australia. So my colleague, Ms. Timmins, she actually has just joined us in August from the Department of Agriculture, and she actually was managing the counsellors, so she can comment, from firsthand experience. But we can talk about. In Post, we just have locally engaged staff because we are a much smaller agency than DAF. But our locally engaged staff are very well connected, as I said, and can provide important, information and connections and networks to our DAF counselors there, as well as to DFAT and all the agencies, actually DQ as well. It depends country to country what type of work Australia is doing, but our LES staff are in constant contact, an important part of that team at Post. But I'll let Laura also add to that.
Thank you very much. So my previous role, I used to look after the Agriculture Councillor Network based in Asia and the Middle East, and was also a previous Agriculture Councillor based in Indonesia. The network, both of our agriculture councillors and our overseas officers for ACR, where they are co-located or overlap, do work very closely. What we have seen over a number of years is that our trading partners or partner countries are increasingly interested in cooperation and capacity building, and not just a trading relationship. They are looking for Australian expertise, and Australian research is very highly sought after. So what ACR brings to that relationship is an ability to provide support for research in areas that DAF might not, and to actually then help build up expertise in the countries. For example, in ACR we have been doing a lot of work on biosecurity throughout the Indo-Pacific region, which complements the work that DAF is doing in the region. The other thing that it does in our partner countries is it shows that we're not just there for, to buy and sell things, but to develop a deeper partnership and a deeper relationship. So I think certainly what I've seen is that in the missions, there's certainly a very close relationship between the different agencies and our ACR overseas network. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. I might just note that you did receive a glowing report in the Moore report. I noted that they talked about the Sunrise Group research that you've done with the Japonica-style rice, and how that had really, been a big success. So we have looked at some of those things, and I think that's great. In terms of what we're looking at in this investigation, we want to make recommendations that will add additionality, I suppose. So what sort of things would you like to see us recommend on your behalf in this report? I mean, what would be helpful is, I suppose, if you could just talk us through some of those suggestions. I know you've included some of them in your submission, but I'm interested in just hearing from you about how we could not only continue the good work that you're doing, but grow that work and those results.
So I might start, and then I'll hand to my colleagues, but one of the things, so the last 6 months I've spent quite a bit of time meeting with our partners in Southeast Asia. I know it's South Asia, not Southeast Asia, but Laura and I were in Pakistan last week, and we're getting consistent messages from all of the government's ministers, secretaries of agriculture, private sector, that they need more assistance from Australia in terms of capacity development. So deep learning about, new methods to address climate issues, new varieties of crops, sharing of germplasm, learning our different agricultural production techniques, but capacity development. So every country we've gone to, there's been requests to help with climate resilience and even climate mitigation, and saying Australia is a world leader in farming in dry, extremely difficult climates, and they view us as being able to really be able to sustain those harsh climatic conditions. And they want to learn from us more and also work together on research issues, sharing knowledge on, what methods, what varieties of crops, what diseases and pests are going to, emerge as we have changing climate and more volatile climate. And so capacity building in research and in policy. Policy is another aspect that comes up too, just understanding what policy changes are needed to address the agriculture issues, including trade, that they're facing. So I might let either Dave or Laura comment further. So Laura, do you want to?
Thanks. I think what we are seeing is that the request is for capacity building in people and people in middle management to help them come up and develop capacity. I think we are seeing a lot on the policy advice, which I think is something that's very useful for Australia to engage in, because it does help a better understanding of Australia's policy positions and Australia's settings, if we are able to provide that policy advice. And I think what I've witnessed as well is that because ACR has been investing in capacity development for 40 years, the people who we have supported are now really in decision-making positions and can be very useful to advance Australia's interests as well, because they understand our situation, and they are very helpful when we are looking to advance our relationships as well with those countries.
And I might ask, thanks Laura, I might ask Dave to add some thoughts in about the climate aspects too.
Yeah, thanks so much, Wendy. Just to add to Wendy's sort of introductory remarks around climate, so ACR's played a really significant role over 42 years, predominantly focused on improving global food security and the additionality of livelihood improvement to have development outcomes, and highly successful in terms of the role that it's played. But as Wendy alluded to, now we face a challenge globally, not only around food security and livelihood improvement, but globally we face a challenge in terms of climate change, particularly in terms of the contribution agri-food systems make to greenhouse gas emissions. Australia has developed a really critical capability in terms of supporting industry progress and move down a net zero pathway. And as Wendy was alluding to, all of our partners in ASEAN, the Asia Pacific, and even broader globally, they all have net zero pathways embedded within their nationally determined contributions over a long period of time, through until 2050, 2060, 2070. So there's a significant opportunity to build on ACR's strong work that it's done within the region, building long-term capability, just as Laura's outlined, but addressing this critical challenge of the agri-food system not only delivering food security and livelihood improvement, but also making a contribution to lowering greenhouse gas emissions and creating more resilient systems within those developing country economies. And this is a key policy agenda for all of our partners.
I might just use a couple of examples that we're being asked for from Southeast Asian countries. So we've been doing work in soils in partnership with the Philippines government, and this is ACR is leading the research side of soils research, and soils are really important from a climate aspect in multiple ways. One is that we know that just like here, soils everywhere in the world, our production systems' use of inputs have really had an impact on soils, as well as salinity issues in some countries. So they're wanting to understand how they can repair those soils. And we know that when soils become more productive again, that then we need less inputs. And it also helps farmers be more climate resilient. The other aspect of it, and it's kind of a long story, but I'll tell it quickly, is that countries, when we trade, there's increasing demand for products that are low input use, right? So low use of chemical fertilizers, any chemical pesticides, and issues with MRLs, so the residue on those crops. And so what countries are saying is that we know if we can improve our soils and look at the ecology of that system, that we can reduce dependence on inputs, use of inputs, which then makes us more competitive in a trading, in international trade, and addresses multiple issues. So the work that we're doing in the Philippines, when we go and talk about it in Indonesia, it's highly demanded. Vietnam is asking us to do similar work on soils, and budget is very limited. But that is one where when we talk soils, it brings in climate, it brings in overuse of chemicals, and allows us to start also addressing policy issues, which, subsidies on inputs really distort agricultural markets and also have negative environmental consequences. So if we could do more on the soil side, bringing in all aspects of improving soil quality, there's a good opportunity there. And the other request that we get asked is the ability to have more staff in country. And that is win-win for both of our countries, because it allows our partners to have somebody to go consult with, on different agricultural issues. And then it also gives us that insight, that deep knowledge and deep partnership with those countries to really understand what issues are being faced. Laura, do you want to say any more about that?
And I think the other aspect of something that would be useful to increase our engagement in is bringing more people to Australia to see the innovations here. I think the people-to-people links is really important. Bringing farmers, particularly smallholder commercial farmers, to see Australian innovators. Those farmers are the ones that are the leaders in their countries and early adopters. And we see that bringing people along the whole supply chain would be very useful, and I think build also stronger links between Australia and the countries in Southeast Asia and understanding.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's really good...
Thank you for that. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, there's really good examples of where, as part of our projects, we have brought our partners, anyone from smallholder farmers to traders to processors, all aspects of that value chain, over to Australia by request, and as part of our projects to look at and meet, similar people in the value chain here in Australia. And it's just led to co-investment, to co-learning, and friendship as well between our countries that, lets both of us better understand each other. So I think that is a really important and something we're always asked about whenever we're building any kind of project, whenever I'm meeting with governments is there an opportunity for us to come? And it's not a joyride to come visit Australia. It's genuine interest to come learn about different aspects of our innovation system, right down to understanding what we're doing to improve soil, to understanding, how our different government agencies work on standards or biosecurity issues. Every aspect of our agri-food system is what they're wanting to learn about and understand.
Yes, we've received a lot of evidence really backing some of those statements up, Professor, so thank you. I'm going to go to my colleague, Mr. Burnell now, and then over to you, Dr. Mike and Brian, if you can hear us. I know you've got some difficulty where you are, but if you wanted to ask a question, I will do it in that order. But thanks, Mr. Burnell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming in and giving evidence today. I'm just interested, in your opening statement, you touched on ACR being funded through a shared model between governments and private sectors. What does that actually look like? Is it a like-for-like co-investment, or is it weighted slightly differently?
Yeah, thank you. So we are, I probably should have said at the beginning, we are ODA funding. We're funded through Overseas Development Assistance. And so how we can spend our money is restricted by, limitations on ODA funding, and we're very careful and cautious about that. So when we partner with countries, the main contribution of most of our partner countries, just because of the level of development, is in kind, and it's significant in kind. So, staffs of salaries, facilities, all of those aspects of it are always in kind. So our funds are used for operational costs of doing the research. Now, in places, Philippines is a good example, Vietnam as well, where there's higher levels of development on the country as a whole, emerging economies, then that's where those countries are coming in. And in the case of the Philippines, they're actually in our scholarship programs, so PhD scholarships, we have an initiative on soils. They're funding, I think it's about 80% of the cost of that, and we're funding about 20% of that. And we're also getting in-kind from, that one is with Griffith University, so we're getting in-kind from Griffith, and I believe you could actually call that cash because they're contributing scholarships as well. So it really differs country to country. Philippines would be the example where there's more coming from a country than from Australia. It's usually, more heavily Australia, to be honest, and that's to be expected given the level or given that we're ODA. But I should say that if you were to actually count a dollar amount on the in-kind that they contribute, that would be worth a fairly significant amount.
Thank you for that. It leads me to my next question around how the projects you fund, how they are selected. Okay,
so it's really in line with the development policy, but this is how ACR has commissioned, and it's in our act in terms of how we are supposed to commission our work. So we meet with the institutions. It varies country to country. It might be ministries of ag. It might be a specific research agency in the countries, but we call them our main partners. And we sit down and meet with them regularly. Sometimes it's a couple of times a year. It's at least annually. And we hear about what their issues are. And we'll talk about, where our Australian innovation system be best, have a comparative advantage, essentially. So sometimes we get us to help on things and we're like, well, we don't really have that expertise in Australia, or we're not as strong as, say, another country. But in most things, they know us well because we've been working in most countries for, 4 decades. And they know what Australia's unique comparative advantage is in research and in capacity development. So it's sitting down talking about those. And sometimes there is a tender process sometimes in terms of bringing someone in, but the majority of our research projects are through knowing who has the expertise in Australia. And our projects are usually multiple Australian institutions, ranging from universities to CSIRO, state departments. We've had over time, almost all state departments of agriculture have worked on those projects. Now, over time, state departments of agriculture are being, reduced quite significantly. But we've heard cases, for example, in New South Wales last year, when I was there for an event, the Department of Primary Industries said they wouldn't have been able to keep staff on had they not been working on ACR projects dealing with biosecurity issues in Southeast Asia, that then when there was a major biosecurity issue in that state, that they had the expertise because they'd been working on ACR projects, and ACR funding had allowed them to be able to keep a staff member on. So, that's kind of an example. You didn't ask that question, but it shows you how we also help our Australian innovation system to be sustainable. So we don't do, it's not an open tendering process. It's through partnership and really trying to make sure that we're bringing in new researchers all the time, to be equitable, to keep growing the next generation of researchers as well.
Thank you for that. I'm just being conscious of time, so I might pass on to my other colleagues if they've got some questions, but I appreciate those answers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Burnell. Dr. Freelander, over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Professor Hamburger and colleagues. I've just got a couple of questions. The Elizabeth MacArthur Agricultural Institute just is on the border of my electorate, as is the Sydney University Agriculture Department farm at Camden on the border of my electorate. And we do get a lot of students from overseas coming to both those institutions. I'm wondering, do you separately seek out people from Southeast Asia on like a scholarship system in partnership with the university, or can you just explain to me how you organise these sort of student exchanges?
Yep. So we have a formal scholarship program called the John Allwright Fellowship Program. And what we do with that is we put a call out every year to all of our partner countries, and it's a competitive scholarship process. Those, to be competitive for it, you basically have to be connected with an ACR project and have a good probability of getting into the university that you want to go to, whether it's University of Sydney, University of New South Wales, University of Adelaide, all of those universities in Australia that are working in agriculture or related types of aspects of the agri-food system. All of them have had John Allwright Fellows. We also will work with universities. Griffith is a good example where the universities will come up with scholarships that are connected with the research projects and offer scholarships for international students from the country and connected with the project or the issue to come in and work on the research project.
Sorry, can you just tell me what sort of numbers of students would be involved in that every year?
So the John Allwright Fellowship Program, this year's intake will be about 20. Again, our entire budget is about $110 million, and we do bring in external funding through agreements with other agencies. So the scholarship program, we'd love for it to be much bigger. We think it's a really big opportunity, but right now it is only we're only able to offer 20 students a year through ACR funds. And those are masters and PhD. I should also say, and I'll say this from my own experience as being a professor, so sometimes as part of the research projects, you can work with your own university and create other scholarships that are offered through. For example, when I was at the University of Adelaide, we had some that were offered in partnership with the state government. So funds came in from the state government. That was on a dairy project. And oftentimes universities, although it's getting harder and harder for universities, they'll use some of their international scholarships and connect it with the project because they see value in that. So you do, when you're sitting in the seat of the commissioned organization, which is usually an Australian institution, you do everything you can to try to get more students in those projects because you know that creates a sustainable, it's helping the country and it helps the research in a sustainable long-term way.
Right, great. Thanks very much. I'd better stop there, I think, given the time. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Mike. And look, I do want to thank you for coming today. You haven't been asked to provide any additional information. You will be sent, however, a copy of the transcript of your evidence, and you'll have the opportunity to request corrections to transcription errors. But thank you for your time and your evidence and your submission, and more broadly, the work that you're doing for our nation. We appreciate it very much, and we thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Senators. It was a wonderful opportunity to get to share that and talk today. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. All the best to you.
Thank you.
Members of the committee will just allow our next witnesses to get comfortable and get seated, and then we'll kick off from there.
Meryl, I'm in a public place, so I'm going to put my questions to you via the Signal app.
Sure, Brian, the only difficulty I might have with that is that I'm currently using my phone to just let me. Excellent, thank you, Bill. I now welcome representatives of the Red Meat Advisory Council to give evidence today. For the Hansard record, would you please state your names and the capacity in which you appear before the committee?
Susan Wakeford, CEO of the Red Meat Advisory Council. I'm also joined by some colleagues, Chris Parker, who's the CEO of Cattle Australia, Patrick Hutchinson, who is the CEO of the Australian Meat Industry Corporation, and also Mark Harvey-Sutton, who is the CEO of Australian Live Exporters Council. Mark is just slightly delayed and will be joining us shortly.
Sure, no problem at all. Thank you. This hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. Now that we've got things up and running a little more successfully with the technology, I will just ask my colleagues to introduce themselves to you so you know who you're speaking to as well. We'll do it in this order. Mr. Burnell, Dr. Freelander, and I'll introduce Mr. Mitchell. He's coming to us from Tasmania as well. So over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Chair. Matt Burnell, the federal member for Spence, are taking the largest undercover horticultural cropping in the Southern Hemisphere. That's me done.
Great, thank you. And look, I'm not sure if Mike's there at the moment. Are you with us, Dr. Freelander? No, we might have just momentarily lost him, but Dr. Freelander is also there. And actually, Brian Mitchell's back online. So, Brian, I'll let you introduce yourself if you like. Thanks.
Cheers. Brian Mitchell, Federal Member Alliance in Tasmania. I'm just in a public place, so I'll be relatively silent, which is rare for me. But,
Waiting to get on a plane, I believe, Brian. So you're trying to be an excellent multitasker. Dr. Freelander, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Mike Freelander, member for Macarthur, out of southwestern Sydney.
Excellent, thank you. And Meryl Swanson, committee chair and member for Paterson, which is broadly in the Hunter region of New South Wales, a couple of hours north of Sydney. I now invite you to make a brief opening statement before we proceed to members' questions.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. As I said, my name is Susan Wakeford and I'm the CEO of the Red Meat Advisory Council, or RMAC as we're commonly known. RMAC and its members thank the committee for the opportunity to speak to our submission today into the role of Australian agriculture into Southeast Asian markets. By way of background, RMAC is Australia's only policy leadership and advisory forum comprised of producers, lot feeders, processors, manufacturers, independent retailers, and livestock exporters representing the entire red meat supply chain across the beef, sheep, and goat industries. Our members include the Australian Livestock Exporters Council, or ALIC, Australian Lot Feeders Association, ALPHA, Australian Meat Industry Council, AMIC, Cattle Australia, CA, Sheep Producers Australia, SPA, and Goat Industry Council of Australia, GICA. Today, as I said, I'm joined by colleagues representing some of the above-mentioned peak industry bodies, Chris Parker, Patrick Hutchinson and Mark Harvey-Sutton. Each and every day, Australia's red meat and livestock industry supplies safe, nutritious, high-quality red meat to over 25 million Australians and over 100 export destinations. The 74,000 businesses that make up our red meat industry pride themselves on their ability to apply the highest level of care to our livestock and environment whilst maintaining profitable and sustainable industry. Australia is a major source of red meat and livestock to the dynamic and growing Southeast Asian market. Our industry has built strong relationships and partnerships in the region over the many years and are well placed to continue to support and help this region meet its food security needs. To allow for continued and strong partnerships in the Southeast Asian region, we look to the government to support the following imperative actions: maintain and improve access to these markets, continue to focus on alleviating challenging technical non-tariff barriers to trade, enhance trading relationships to deliver commercial benefits for both importers and exporters, ensure resourcing and capacity is available for systems and technology to help build supply chain resilience, commit to supporting the Indonesia-Australia partnership on food security in the red meat and cattle sector beyond this year, being 2024, continue to support collaborative programs to bolster biosecurity preparedness in the region via our research and development corporations, use scientifically based evidence in the development of domestic and trade-related policy positions, address the impact of activist groups to seek to operate against Australia's national interests as an agricultural exporting nation, and to receive federal government commitment to an ongoing cattle export industry to Southeast Asia, recognising the vital role the Australian industry plays in supporting the development of these countries, their food security and continuous improvement in animal welfare, and the establishment of regulatory cooperation and capacity building fund to be used to fund strategic long-term regulatory cooperation activities with Southeast Asian government competent authorities. We look forward to continuing to work closely with government, department and industry and continuing to build upon our strong partnerships and future opportunities in the Southeast Asian region. Thank you again for this opportunity, and we are happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much for that. I just want to pick up on the point that you made about the Indonesian-Australia partnership on food security in the red meat and cattle sector. Can you just expand on how you would like the government to continue with that, expand on it? How can it be improved? How would you like to see the program? Could you just talk us through that a little bit more, please?
Can I please pass across to one of my colleagues?
I'm happy to take that. Sorry for talking over on the line. And good morning, committee and chair. My name is Mark Harvey-Sutton. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Australian Livestock Exporters Council. So I think it was 2012, I could have that date wrong, but the Red Meat Cattle Partnership with Indonesia was developed. This was a $60 million partnership that was designed to, fund joint projects focusing on the development of the Indonesian production sector, but also the opportunity for the Australian sector to increase its understanding of the Indonesian marketplace. So that discontinued at the start of this year. And the reason that recommendation is in that submission is we actually are about to enter a very interesting period with Indonesia. President-elect Prabowo is due to be inaugurated at the end of this month. And one of his key commitments is the Nutritious Meals Program. So what this is a program that will provide free lunches to school children and pregnant mothers as well. And the idea is to address, the nutritional shortfall that can occur in the population at the moment. Stunting of growth is a big issue in Indonesia, and what the president would like to do is actually build that nutritional base for those people. This is a program of a huge scale. It would equate to about 85 million meals per day. And one of the things that they are keen to really ramp up is access to fresh milk. And rather than importing that fresh milk, what they would look to do is actually increase their production. Indonesia's dairy industry, although I don't represent the dairy industry here in Australia, it would be fair to say it's relatively small scale. There is fresh production of milk in Indonesia that takes place in higher regions, cooler regions there, but they have an ambition to import up to 600,000 dairy cattle over the next 4 years. And that, of course, presents an opportunity, but we must also be cognizant of making sure that we support Indonesia's ambition, but also that we position ourselves as a trusted advisor so that we can manage any animal welfare risks, food safety risks that can come along with that, and also that we are able to assist Indonesia to make sure that they can actually implement their nutritious meals program.
Excellent. Thanks, Mr. Harvey-Sutton, and welcome. We did actually take evidence from the Indonesian ambassador on that very topic, and we've also received evidence from the dairy industry, granular evidence about that. So, yes, thank you for reinforcing that, but we have received a great deal of interest and evidence on that, so it's something that we'll definitely be taking into consideration, and it's certainly been flagged to us as a huge opportunity for us in relation to trade with Indonesia, particularly. So I might share some time with some colleagues, but one of the things that I did want to just pick up on at the end, if we've got time, but we were talking about those non-tariff trade barriers. I'd be interested to unpack that, but look, I might just defer to my colleagues, give them some opportunity, because I've had the first bite of the cherry both times this morning. So I might, Dr. Freelander, did you want to pick up there? And then if we can come back to, if we've got some time, we might come back to those non-tariff trade barriers if time permits. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks very much. Mr. Harvey-Sutton, you mentioned the school lunch program, which I actually think as a paediatrician is really important, infant and child nutrition. Is there room for increased amounts of red meat consumption associated with that as well? And would that give another sort of string to the red meat exporters' bow by having meat that rather than live export to Indonesia? Would you like to comment on that?
Exactly right, Dr. Freelander. It certainly would. I guess their focus on dairy, I think, stems from this. If you're a developed country, if you're a modern country, you have access to fresh milk. It's very much a status that they're seeking. But I think also as they work through the process of trying to work out how this could be implemented, practicality will play its role as well. And it may not just be fresh milk to 85 million children. It could be other, vegetables, red meat, of course. And so I think there is big opportunity for the red meat sector. For our sector, we would anticipate an increase in volumes off the back of this program for beef cattle. And that's because of the way they consume the product that we provide. Often it's in the form of bakso balls, which are like meatballs that go in a noodle soup. That's a very popular dish, and it's very cost-effective to produce. So we would absolutely anticipate an increase in this off the back of the program. But there's a lot of work to be done, both by Indonesia and also from the Australian end, both government and industry, to make sure that we can help them through that.
Yeah, well, that's my next question. Are we being proactive enough in really helping sponsor that program and encouraging the use of Australian products in it?
Well, certainly from an industry perspective, I would say yes. We were in Jakarta about a month ago, and we had a number of meetings from an industry-facing perspective, but we also talked to the embassy and the Australian government, of course, and that was alongside the grains industry and the dairy industry. And what we were keen to do is actually try and meet with as many influential people as we could around the incoming regime, and that included officials, that included people from NGOs that are likely to have influence with the Prabowo government. And what we wanted to do was basically send a simple message that we are very supportive of supporting your ambition, and please use us as a trusted counsel. We have a range of research from our industry. We're very well positioned to help you, but please remember us when you're looking to implement this program. And I can report off the back of that trip, we have had some contact with government officials there. Had a meeting last night with, can't remember the exact name of the department, sorry, but their animal welfare department, and they were keen to understand what research we had so that they could actually implement good animal welfare as they look to ramp up their livestock production. So it was a very successful trip.
Oh, great. And do you see there being room for similar sort of programs in other places in Southeast Asia?
It's hard to, it's very hard to know because I think we have to always remember Indonesia is a very unique country, very diverse. It's a large country, and it's actually quite a developed country in many respects, but there is a huge swathe of the population that probably needs to catch up, I suppose, for lack of a better description. Other countries around Southeast Asia that we supply livestock to, it's probably a little bit different. So in Indonesia, it's very much a food security type market access arrangement. A lot of the other markets we'll send livestock to, they go into the tourist industry, the food service industry, and things like that. So there is potentially opportunity, but I'd be cautious about patchworking what Indonesia's trying to do to other countries in the region.
Yeah. Well, just from a public health point of view, we have been to other countries in Southeast Asia and in the Pacific that do struggle with infant and child nutrition. And I'm just thinking that whilst, the agricultural sector is important, we can help with a lot of good health research and information around child development and nutrition. And we've seen issues in places like Papua New Guinea, Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam around, child nutrition that is very important. And our agricultural industry could be a big promoter in those countries of this concept of child nutrition. And the Department of Health, I know, has worked a lot on that in some of our near neighbours. So keep us in mind as a partner.
Will do. And I think, we're very happy to play our role. We haven't worked with the Department of Health to date, but if we can make those linkages, we'd be very happy to play our part.
Great. Thanks. I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Chair.
Chair, it's Dr. Parker here. If I could add, please. You're on mute. I'm assuming it's okay.
Certainly, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Dr. Chris Parker, CEO of Cattle Australia. Dr. Freeland, I think it's a really good point you make. I think the opportunity to put red meat as part of a healthy diet, providing a range of nutritional requirements that developing bodies need, is something we really need to be continuing to promote, and we are very strongly promoting. I'm sure Patrick will have more up-to-date figures, but it is worth pointing out there's 70,000 tonnes put into Indonesia, $500 million worth of red meat. It's not a small market by any stretch of the imagination, and yes, it's an important live market for grass-fed cattle producers as well. The point I'm coming to is that we really need to be encouraging the government to contribute towards the revamping of that red meat partnership with Indonesia. A really important program, that could have the opportunity to be broadened out a little bit to maybe even some technical assistance to Indonesians in regard to some of their lab capacity, particularly given very important challenges they're facing with lumpy skin disease and foot and mouth disease. And I'm keen that we meet our obligations as a good partner in the region, but also there's clearly a bit of self-interest in that for Australia if we're able to assist Indonesia and continue to assist Indonesia in the manner in which it deals with some of these biosecurity challenges. So and the Red Meat Partnership, Dr. Freelander, has been and is a really good vehicle for that. And we really do need to be thinking about how we can work with government and clearly use government funds with industry funds to be able to revamp that particular program. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Doctor. I'm just curious, so just to be very clear, the status of that program, is that it's currently not progressing? Is that, I just want to be clear about that at the moment.
It's essentially finished,
right,
Chair.
okay, thank you.
It's got no more funding and it's over and it's been closed down, and it just seems a real shame to me given the real priority of the current or the administration that's about to come in, that we aren't there knocking on the door going, do you want to do another one, and here's some money and an industry partnership, a government industry partnership to do that, Chair,
Okay.
that's all.
Yeah, no, it's an important point to make, and these are the sorts of pieces of information that we need to make our report as fulsome as it can be. So, thank you very much for that, Mr. Burnell.
Thank you, Chair, and possibly a good segue to one of my questions. I just wanted to get a bit of an understanding from your perspective of whether we're doing enough to protect Australia and the region from biosecurity threats.
I'm happy to start on that one, colleagues. Chris Farger from Cattle Australia. Look, it's a very hard question because how much is enough? I think there's been a significant investment by the government and industry in assisting Indonesia and also protecting our own border. And Cattle Australia has been quite open in congratulating the government, particularly when it invested a couple of years ago in increased biosecurity measures and also providing assistance to Indonesia. What I would say is that I think we're moving into a new phase, and I think we need to think about how we support Indonesia. And again, I'm realistic enough to say in our self-interest here, to be able to manage the ongoing endemic nature of these diseases in their country. And I would specifically look at how we can build both the capacity of Indonesia, but also both the infrastructure to be able to manage the types of laboratory testing that they're going to need to be doing, to be able to articulate where these diseases are and whether they're spreading, all those sorts of things. And also thinking about vaccines and how they might choose to use them and manage vaccines in that environment. So are we doing enough? We would always say no government can do enough in the biosecurity space. And that's something that's been a major priority for obviously the cattle industry for many years. But as I said, I think we're moving into a new phase, and I think we need to think about what that relationship looks like and what money we might need to be providing in expertise and infrastructure into Indonesia. And I hate to sound like a broken record, but I keep coming back to that Red Meat Partnership. You've got a well understood existing vehicle, or not quite existing anymore because it's finished, a good vehicle to be able to take forward some of these things. And also you had ACR colleagues on before who are also very active, not just in Indonesia, but the rest of the region. Thank you.
No, thank you. Did anybody else have comments on that question?
Yeah, I just might, if you can hear me. Patrick Hutchinson, CEO of the Australian Meat Industry Council. We've got to remember as well when we're going through this process or this discussion, and unfortunately I'm going to have to drop off in a few minutes because I know we've got to catch a plane to be where those other people are in that boardroom. So I just got caught between these two. Yeah, I am I guess we're very interested in the broader aspect. I know that Dr. Freeland has talked previously about other markets. We've also got to look at the sheep meat industry with this process as well. Huge market, especially for sheep meat into New Guinea and all of those nutritional areas. But Indonesia is obviously our biggest market in ASEAN for both live cattle, but also for beef. So we're already at 60,000 tonnes this year, roughly end of September, and we were 60,000 tonnes last year, end of December. Now we are already we're 15,000 tonnes into Vietnam and 10,000 tonnes into the Philippines. The reason, and that's above where they were for the total, both of them last year. Reason being price and availability and faith in the product that we have, above and beyond a very watery, poor Indian buffalo meat, but it's very cheap. So I think across a few of these areas, the scenario that we have is that we are also dealing with third world nations, and those nations are looking to ensure that they provide protein. So on one hand, we want to be seeing farmers and others in the supply chain well paid for products, but on the other hand, in a lot of circumstances, especially in Southeast Asia, those people are then not, don't have the ability to be paying for certain cuts in the way others can. But that means as well as that Australia's most sustainable industry, us, we actually provide them with other parts, and we provide them with what's called trim and frozen meat and all that sort of component. So as an industry, we actually use every single solitary piece of the animal that we are provided. And interestingly, throughout Southeast Asia, those pieces that certainly no Australian would ever eat or ever think of eating or using are actually used in Southeast Asia and notably again in Indonesia. So that also includes things like rendering product, and we're still struggling to get back into the rendering market in Indonesia. I think we're pretty much close, but to give you a comparison, it's 50% bigger in income than the total live sheep industry. Yeah, we're still struggling 4 or 5 years later. So I think that, as well as that, the goat industry is increasing in production greatly throughout Southeast Asia as well. So I think across the board, that's the biosecurity challenge as well, that we are looking at not just live cattle out of Darwin, we are looking at a whole ASEAN nation that we all have FTAs with and are part of trade pacts broader and wider than that are all having their own issues and idiosyncrasies with biosecurity. We're seeing lumpy skin disease in South Korea, of all places. We're seeing lumpy skin disease throughout many other countries in Southeast Asia. We see other issues as well with that in other Southeast Asian markets, in Vietnam, etc. And again, with that process, there are some technical trade issues that we have across the board. We work exceptionally well with the Department of Agriculture to solve those. So I think that across the board, what we've got is a very broad market that takes more products from Australia than combined in any other market around the world because they want to use everything. But we need to recognise that it's very price sensitive, firstly, and secondly, that it's got a large exposure to all of those other components. So I think that for us, certainly as an industry, we need to have an exceptionally broad approach, and our view has always been that through FTAs, because we have the relationship, that an ASEAN approach to biosecurity needs to be done in very much the same way that we're looking at it that has already been discussed around nutrition. The only other thing I'd add is that noting that what was previously discussed about working with the health department, we've also got concerns that the same Australian Health Department is going down the pathway under dietary guidelines in this country of saying eat less red meat around sustainability. So I think that, if we're going to all work together, we've got to make absolutely and utterly sure that that we understand the outcomes that we're looking to achieve. So. Chair, thank you. But I've been listening to everybody, and I thought I'd better try to answer as many of those from the red meat export or boxed red meat export that I could before I have to fall off in 5 minutes.
No problem. Thanks, Mr. Hutchison. I do appreciate that. And maybe we've got lessons to learn from developing nations in relation to being, able to consume other parts and components of a beast. I know a lot of chefs in Australia, starting now to look at some of those cuts of meat that previously we haven't been as keen on, slow cooking them and doing other unusual things, with them as we get more and more Southeast Asian influence in our cuisine. So I think it can go two ways, but it's a really interesting point to make, and I thank you for making it. Just in the time we have left, we don't have a lot of time. We've got about probably 8 minutes or so before we hit that 20 past mark. But do you think we could circle back to? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Burnell. Have you concluded there? I was assuming that you had, but if you haven't,
no. Look, I think I actually think that the question you've got that you parked at the start is probably of higher value. So I'd prefer to hear the answer in relation to that question that you were looking to ask. Thank you, Chair.
Sure, no problem. Just wanting to go back to those non-tariff barriers, and if you could just maybe give us some examples or talk us through that, and what would be some recommendations that, as a committee, we could make that would, improve the trade, make it easier. I know it's a broad question, but is someone happy to give us some
I'll kick
into
off.
that?
Yeah, happy to kick off. This is sort of our bread and butter around the technical market access issues. Look, very, very simply, we have such a good working relationship with the Department of Agriculture at the moment that, we work hand in glove with them to provide the necessary impacts that occur on us from these technical market constraints. Now, they are very broad. Each market has one or the other. And by that, I mean, as an example, we have technical market access issues, say, in meeting changing halal requirements in Malaysia and in Indonesia. We have sometimes white offal issues that we're working on with Vietnam. We've got, as I talked about, rendering issues with Indonesia, which we've pretty much solved. And we do know that there's continual auditing being done across the board. And then there's obviously the trade aspects about, well, we were happy to take more meat if you take more pineapples or bananas or those sorts of things. So I don't think...
So can I just interrupt for a second?
Yep.
Pardon my ignorance, but what do you mean rendering issues? What does that mean?
So a number of years ago, Indonesia ceased the importation of rendered products. So that's meat and bone meal for basically as a product from Australia because of pork material that was alleged to be within there under testing. So that's taken a number of years to get finalised, and as I said, we're nearly there. So.
Good. Thanks.
What do they do with that? What do the Indonesians do with that?
Range of things. Sometimes livestock feed. Sometimes for poultry, especially. Sometimes it's utilised around fertiliser, etc. Those are two sort of main areas there.
Thank you.
But just to conclude on that is that what I would say is that this committee probably and this outcome around technical market access probably can't, in this market, ASEAN, add too much because we're working on them with the department anyway. So often we see, and I've had a number of years negotiating us back into China, that, in a lot of circumstances, they want their bureaucracies working with ours effectively well and don't really like governments or industry or ministers or industry jumping over the top and having 2, 4 or 6 cents worth into these sorts of things. So I would think with here it's more about, one, faith in the department industry are working together. But if I could request anything, and it's part of our own budget submissions, previously is we do really need to look at the future funding of the Agricultural Department, because it does rely heavily on areas in relation to cost recovery in our industry. So our industry alone, even though we've completely revolutionised a number of ways that were once cost recovered that we're managing ourselves, it still takes $75 million a year out of the purse strings of the industry. And then there's obviously that is also being undertaken within live export as well. So I think clearly for us, we're wanting to make sure that there is enough personnel within the Department of Agriculture that's actually going to help us tackle these, into the future market access issues, because whilst we manage them from an implementation and issues basis ourselves, inevitably G2G is always where it always is managed. So we need to be making sure that that G part for Australia is current, is effective, and is well resourced. So.
Okay, so just on that, it's interesting that you've raised funding of the department, because we did have a question set aside to you saying, do you believe that the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry is adequately and sustainably funded to play its role in maintaining and enhancing trade with Southeast Asia? And it sounds to me as though you're suggesting that it isn't.
No.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Did anyone, colleagues, did you want to ask anything else before we?
Chair, could I just add to that briefly?
Yes, certainly.
I think it's just also important to note, and it's in support of Mr. Hutchinson's promotion of extra funding for the department. Last year we saw biosecurity becoming a technical market access barrier for live cattle into Indonesia. Indonesia had concerns following some testing they did that identified lumpy skin disease in Australian cattle. And while it was a technical issue and it got worked through, and I don't have any specific recommendation around that part of it, I think it's very important as we look in the context of the incoming regime in Indonesia, the geopolitical importance of it, that we do make sure that, particularly post, we've got two excellent agricultural councillors there that do a wonderful job. But, we should be encouraging the department to visit these key markets as much as possible so that we can build good, strong relationships so that if we do have issues like happened last year emerging, that relationship is on very good, solid ground. Not suggesting it wasn't, but we can always make it better. So I'd just support that.
Excellent. Look, thanks very much for giving evidence today. You will be given a copy of the transcript to request any transcription errors, but I really do appreciate your time and thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you. We'll just pause while we invite our next guests online. Ozvej. Representatives of Ozvej to give evidence today. For the Hansard record, would you please state your name and the capacity in which you appear before the committee?
Michael Coote, CEO, Ozvej.
Lucy Gregg, GM of Public Affairs and Communications.
Thank you very much. This hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. Just before I ask you to make a brief opening statement, I'll just let the committee briefly introduce ourselves to you, kicking off with Mr. Burnell.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome again, Lucy and Michael. Great to see you, as always. Matt Burnell, obviously the federal member for Spence. As you're very aware, we take in the largest undercover cropping in the Southern Hemisphere in my neck of the woods. So thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Burnell. Dr. Freelander?
Oh, hi. Thanks for presenting to us. Mike Freelander, member for Macarthur, out of southwestern Sydney, and still have quite a large agricultural industry in my electorate as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Freelander. Meryl Swanson, Committee Chair, member for Paterson in the Broadley Hunter region. Welcome and thank you for being with us today. I'll now invite you to make a brief opening statement before we proceed to questions.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to present to the inquiry into the role of Australian agriculture in Southeast Asian markets. Ausveg represents Australia's vegetable, potato and onion industry and the growers responsible for producing 1/3 of the national horticulture output. This equates to around $5.8 billion of the $16.3 billion total horticultural production value for Australia. Australia's agriculture sector plays a crucial role in supporting food security and sustainable development in Southeast Asia, a region facing significant challenges such as rapid population growth, urbanisation and the escalating impacts of climate change. By leveraging our strengths and reputation for growing and supplying high-quality produce using advanced technologies and farming practices, Australia is uniquely positioned to further contribute to the resilience and sustainability of Southeast Asian food systems. The export of premium Australian agricultural products diversifies food sources and supports stability and food security in markets across the region. Australian vegetables are a critical part of this equation. Known for their quality and food safety, Australian vegetable exports are an important contributor to dietary health and diversity in Southeast Asia. Australia's rigorous food safety protocols and advanced agricultural practices ensure that our exported vegetables meet high standards. This fosters consumer confidence and further enhances our international reputation in a region increasingly concerned with food safety. Australian vegetable grower exporters, Southeast Asia represents significant market development opportunities that can drive further demand for Australian produce and support our national and regional economies. Trade in vegetables also facilitates a beneficial exchange of farming technology and techniques, which can contribute to sustainability and productivity enhancements in Southeast Asia. Australian advances and practices can help address yield gaps, reduce crop losses and improve post-harvest management, which are critical to ensuring a stable food supply in Southeast Asia. It is also essential to invest in the development of Southeast Asian expertise and capacity building. Tailored training programs for local farmers and agribusinesses focused on advanced agricultural methods can significantly enhance local skills and knowledge. Additionally, encouraging Australian agribusinesses to engage in Southeast Asian investment and partnership opportunities can help build the necessary infrastructure and strengthen the agricultural value chain in these markets. To fully realise the benefits, bilateral and multilateral collaborations, as well as policy support facilitated by the Australian government, are vital. By forging stronger trade links, harmonising regulations and engaging in regional cooperative frameworks, Australia can support more integrated, secure and resilient food systems in Southeast Asia. But by deepening strategic partnerships and investments, we can address shared challenges while reaping mutual benefits. So thank you again for the opportunity, and my colleague and I are here to answer any of your questions.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Cute. Really appreciate that. I'll flag a couple of things that I'm interested in, and that's what are the opportunities. Obviously, we've got a big market already, but what are the next things on the horizon? Sort of becoming more and more, in demand, I guess, from Southeast Asian countries and customers. So do we have a sort of a view on that? And how do we actually, at the moment, promote our vegetables into Southeast Asia? And what does that look like? But they're my kind of two kicking off questions, but I also want to give my colleagues some opportunity. We're all very excited about vegetables on this committee. So, they're important, obviously. So that's where I'll go. And then Dr. Freelander and Mr. Burnell will come in after me with those more. But thank you.
No, look, thank you, and happy to address those first two questions, and then please jump in if there's anything you want to explore more deeply. So, look, in terms of demand in a lot of Southeast Asian markets, we need to remember that the vegetable or the fruit and vegetable industries is comprised of a whole range of different individual products, or which have their own demand driving factors, as well as their own logistical or trade, phytosanitary trade considerations, which require addressing to get into a market. we have quite established, mature markets in a number of Southeast Asian countries for some of our different vegetables that we export. So vegetable exports are around $250 million annually. About a third of that are carrots, and 90% of that comes out of Western Australia. So, and then for some of the large vegetable categories or vegetable products that we do produce, exports actually quite low. So for carrots, for example, in the Australian industry, 1/3 of our production is exported. When it comes to other large categories like tomatoes or even lettuce, it's less than 1% of our national production makes it to an export market. So we need to remember that vegetable exports globally are only around 10% of total international production. So most vegetables are consumed near where they're grown. So then where export opportunities exist, Australia, like a lot of other competitor nations, are trying to target market share in these individual countries for the different products that they grow. It's a highly competitive marketplace, and we are often quite a low value category with quite slim margins. So each different product or crop that we grow and attempt to export into different markets has its own suite of challenges and barriers in terms of growth, which is why it makes it very important to do that promotional work to actually help establish or grow market share where we do have, technical market access. So there's a range of different ways that the industry currently does this. So obviously individual companies that are already established into markets undertake some of their own promotional activities. At an industry level, AusVeg, in partnership with Hort Innovation as the RDC for horticulture, delivers a fairly comprehensive market development program across Asia and the Middle East, where we annually run about half a dozen outbound trade missions into international markets to both exhibit at trade shows like international food trade events, as well as deliver kind of a whole range of engagement and networking opportunities with retailers and importers in those markets. For Southeast Asia, that over the last decade has included markets such as Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, not Vietnam because we don't have market access for most vegetables into Vietnam, but also other Asian markets, including Japan, Hong Kong, etc. We also supplement that with a large inbound trade mission each year called the Reverse Trade Mission, which brings in 40 international buyers once a year into Australia in the lead up to our Hawk Connections conference in June to showcase local production capabilities and highlight why Australia can produce such high quality and reliable produce for export. And that program's been running for over a decade and has included representatives from across a range of Southeast Asian markets. We also deliver some programs through the Austrade's Export Market Development Grant, so some direct promotional campaigns, because we can't use our some of our R&D levy money through Hort Innovation for direct B2C marketing campaigns. And we've also been the recipient of some of the ATMAC grant funding through DAF over the years as well. So there's a variety of different activities that we've delivered on an annual basis over the years to try and maintain a presence in market, both in market engagement and bringing those customers into Australia, which we feel has been a really effective use of industry levy funds. We could always do more and we would like to do more. And certainly Hort Innovation has been expanding its market development or in-market type presence to support a more unified whole of horticulture presence at key international engagement opportunities over the years. So there is an existing footprint. We'd love to do more, both in the vegetable and wider horticulture industries, but we do have a foundation there.
Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Burnell, do you want to pick up there, please?
I will, Chair, and I think that response, Michael, actually just leads into my question I've got about how important it is to have the Agricultural Counsellors Network to Australia's vegetable trade with Southeast Asia. Should there be more counsellors based in Southeast Asia, and I suppose with a focus around horticultural products?
Look, we're really supportive of the Agricultural Counsellor Network. We do utilise them heavily, particularly around either new market access or market improvement opportunities in terms of that in-market engagement with their counterparts in different countries. And a lot of the key markets and those in Southeast Asia where we often have the most challenges have an existing Ag Counsellor footprint, and we're quite heavily engaged there. When the Agricultural Counsellor Network was being reviewed last year, looking at what opportunities there were to expand the whole footprint of Ag Counsellors globally, our priority in those discussions was saying don't reduce the capacity of those counsellors across Asia and in Southeast Asia, and certainly the outcome of that was sort of, I guess, no reduction in that capacity in those markets that are important to us from a vegetable industry perspective. So, more capacity in specific markets. Some of the difficult markets, such as Indonesia, would be welcomed by ourselves and the broader horticulture industry. But for I guess what we've experienced and the types of challenges and engagement that we have, we've been quite positive about that. And it's only this week that the agricultural counsellors have on one of their callbacks into Australia to meet and do connections with industry. So while there's turnover of counsellors from time to time as their postings come to an end, I think DAF's been quite proactive in ensuring that the counsellors are well connected with industry. And even, I guess, both on the Ag Counsellor and the promotional question from earlier, just last week, Ausveg and Hort Innovation, through a DAF grant, also brought a range of Japanese customers into Australia for a showcase program, and we had the benefit of having the incoming Japan Ag Counsellor spend the whole week travelling with that group and learning a lot about horticulture, engaging with the Japanese horticultural buyers and commercial players, which sets a really good platform as he then goes into market to take up his post in January, to sort of have horticulture front of mind, which is quite strategically useful for us.
Thank you. I'm interested to get your thoughts on what measures should government be taking improving market intelligence or for agricultural exports to Southeast Asia.
Look, more data, the better. Absolutely. We've been really conscious as part of a lot of our industry capability programs that we run here to try and provide and present more and more data and market intelligence type information to exporting vegetable growers and making those types of things available in real time, because our markets are constantly changing and every market's different. So, I think Australia as a trading nation has probably evolved from the old days where Asia was Asia and exporters understand the nuances that different markets have and the different, economic drivers that might be influencing the trading opportunity for what our exporters of our products can do and can achieve. When it comes to market intelligence, I think a bespoke suite of data from each country is important, but where we've got some very mature markets, what can actually drive an increase in trade on an annual basis can be weather events that impact local supply in those countries. So what we often find is that there's retail insights, there's what the market share of Australia is for carrots or for whatever the commodity is in an international market, but might be an opportunity to consider overlaying some of that kind of almost weather type information that impacts on production regions for local supply in those countries. Because if you're going to have I'll pick on Japan just as an example, since I've already mentioned that. If we know that Hokkaido's had a difficult season weather-wise and carrot production's down, then the opportunity, for more seasonal carrot trade spikes exists. So that type of information is typically not easily available, in a kind of a market intelligence type portal, which typically focuses on more economic and consumer type of information.
Thank you for that. Just my last question. I consider that our hort sector is probably one of the most advanced in the world, and I imagine that a lot of the the region is interested in our technology and the way that we grow vegetables. Is that something that's been picked up by countries in the region to export our expertise per se on the ground to assist with their ability to meet their local consumption demand?
I might throw it to my colleague Lucy in a moment, but I would say that to this point, there has been individual type of knowledge exchange type of activities that have happened, but there's not really been a whole of industry push to really present that type of a program to specific countries. So there certainly has been, both from industry and government, narrow examples where those types of programs have been explored, or sort of pilot programs, but not as a consistent, ongoing type of offering, I suppose. Is there anything, Lucy, you'd want to add to that?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I think that's true. I think there's a lot more opportunities for Australian agri-tech businesses to expand into Southeast Asia. What we see from our perspective is that a lot of those Southeast Asian countries have a lot of job-ready employees or potential migrants. They're quite interconnected with agriculture in a lot of those countries. So there's certainly, I think some of the data I saw the other day in relation to our horticultural industry labour agreement is that I think Malaysia and India are the two biggest countries as a source of potentially employees in Australia. So they do have good agricultural skills, but obviously having reciprocal arrangements, and I think that's also one of the benefits of the free trade agreements, is the service side of those free trade agreements and the ability to potentially have visas which allow some of these Southeast Asian students to come out and study agriculture and those types of degrees. But I guess also there's the potential that they may stay in Australia as well. And we know that we've got 46% of growers say they've got workforce shortages. So we certainly see Southeast Asia as, an area that we need to be interconnected with and have reciprocal arrangements.
Thank you. That's it for me for now, Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Burnell. Dr. Freelander.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Coote and Ms. Gregg. Very interesting. We're quite excited in my electorate with the advent of Western Sydney Airport, and already there are a number of horticultural companies that have bought up land around the airport and are looking to produce high-end agricultural products for export. Have you done any sort of horizon scanning looking at where the potential markets for these things are going to be in Southeast Asia? And you did, Mr. Coote, mention briefly that market access could be difficult in places like Vietnam. And could you explain what you mean by that and what we can do to try and improve that?
Yes, certainly. Thank you. There has been a range of industry investments, not just in horticulture, but across the fruit and vegetable sectors through Hort Innovation, looking at, particularly spurred out of COVID and disruption and the need for market diversification on where some opportunities might exist for specific high value fruit or vegetable crops. Once a lot of Australian fruit industries, particularly when China market access was obtained, then started to direct a lot of their industry investment, and a lot of their export returns were coming from China. And when that was disrupted in COVID, the need for diversification was, really had a spotlight shone on it, and they've been exploring other markets. When it comes to, I guess, specific opportunities for individual vegetable crops in different markets, we do have a wide number of markets already available to us without huge market access limitations. So we actually do export vegetables to over 50 markets, but only about 8 to 10 in sort of meaningful volumes. So it's a really mixed kind of picture. Probably where the industry could do more and be more sophisticated is around longer term planning, and then targeting a specific market opportunity, and then working back from where that market opportunity exists to then influence what crop you grow, for example. some of the fruit industries, which I can't speak to the detail of today, have got really comprehensive kind of long-term forecasts around markets that they will target over the next 2, 5, 10 year type of horizon. For vegetable trade, it's probably a bit less sophisticated in our industry, so domestic focused. But we do have specific market access priorities, some of which are being worked on and actively negotiated at the moment. But I guess one opportunity for government, and I'm sure all of you on this call today have heard this particular version of events before. But market access is a painstakingly slow process. Average out time for an outcome in horticultural market access is 10 years. Often it's a lot longer than that. So there really is an opportunity to I guess have a heavier emphasis from government and whole of government on achieving horticultural market access outcomes, more focus from DFAT being involved with DAF to really try and expedite some of those outcomes, because particularly for some of the fruit industries that have got a lot of volume coming onto the market in the coming years, if there's not more international access available, then that's going to be really challenging on the domestic market. So, look, we really support as an industry this government's trade liberalisation agenda and more, free trade agreements. We're hugely supportive of the new UAE CEPA that was a genuine commitment to trying to build that trade ongoing rather than just seeing it as an outlet at a particular point in time. Before COVID, there was a lot of focus from industry and from government on, getting everyone exporting. Everyone can be an exporter, and that probably COVID really, really disrupted that and has highlighted that markets are difficult, increasingly so. In our case, freight and logistics are a real challenge, both from a cost perspective as well as the capacity challenges that we experienced during and coming out of COVID. But, as an industry, in the vegetable industry and certainly the wider horticulture industries, there's an absolute need to have a focus and investment to keep growing those markets because, we know from a recent AusVeg sentiment survey, we've got 34% of growers that are saying they're going to look to exit. Margin squeeze, high input costs and low returns in Australia are still a challenge and are contributing to a lack of viability of a lot of producers in our space. Exports absolutely got to be in the mix to help grow that and develop those opportunities to reduce the reliance on the local market, which is only so big. And that's also got to be combined with, with increasing consumption and demand creation programs both here in Australia, and foreign trading partners are also experiencing, reduced vegetable consumption as well. And the Japanese delegation that I mentioned earlier, last week we had a presentation from them on Friday, and even in Japan they're experiencing a decline in per capita vegetable consumption in a country and a culture that typically eats quite a lot of vegetables. So it's not unique to Australia that people are eating less. We need to do more here to get more Australians eating the recommended nutritional serves of vegetables, and we need to continually be turning up in the markets that we're exporting to and highlighting the attributes of why Australian vegetables are have to be part of the nutritional mix that they're consuming, whether it's for a seasonal window or in markets that we send product to 52 weeks of the year.
And just the other thing that I'm a little bit curious about is in terms of our exports of vegetables, is it because they're perishable and you mentioned the requirements around food and health safety, phytosafety, I think was the correct term, is that right?
Phytosanitary.
Yep. Phytosanitary, thanks, Mr. Burnell. So in terms of that, do we see, what's the breakup of exports? Is it high value, smaller amounts going to places like Singapore, or is it, when you mentioned carrots out of Western Australia? I'm just interested in, if you can, I don't know if you've got the breakdown there, but what does it actually look like in terms of the vegetables that we export to Southeast Asia? Is it, what does that look like? What's the picture?
Yeah, look, so Singapore as a market takes about 50 million of our 250 million in value of exports, and that's across staple hard vegetable, carrots, onions, potatoes, as well as higher value or perceivably higher value air freighted mixed consignments, typically of different vegetables that are going into high end food service and retail. It varies across markets, so. I often hate saying this, but we've got a very diverse category in the vegetable industry. But also, when you overlay that with exporting to up to 50 different markets, there's a different product mix that will be going into that market depending on their other sources of origin for their imported produce, depending on what their the relative wealth of their middle or upper class and what they can afford to buy, and who else we compete with. So carrots are the kind of the number one export for us, but we compete really heavily with local carrots in different markets and a lot with Chinese carrots because China's a major carrot producing nation. So it is a real mix, and hard to sort of give a single simple answer to that question. But one point I would underscore is that for vegetable exports, we don't make a price premium by selling to an export customer. So Singaporean importers know more about the market price on a day in Australia of the price of vegetables than a lot of Australian growers and suppliers do. So typically the price that you'd get for selling to an Australian customer is what you get to an export customer, and then the freight cost will be covered either by the Australian or by the export customer. But it's not. It's difficult to target a high value opportunity. It's different for some of the fruit commodities out of the wider horticulture sector, where there is a price premium in different markets. But for us, it's about volume and getting then economies of scale in your own business by having more channels to market.
Excellent, colleagues. I'm going to leave it there. Did anyone else want to ask something?
Yeah, I did just have a final question, if I could, Chair.
Please.
Moggy, you've mentioned about the phytosanitary certification requirements a number of times, and I do note in your submission that you talked about harmonising biosecurity measures. I think it'd just be valuable just to get your insights on what that looks like from your sector's perspective.
And biosecurity measures and your electorate are obviously a hot topic at the moment, Matt, aren't they? Look, I mean, as a nation and as a trading nation, biosecurity is just becoming so absolutely critical to keeping markets open. We've got pests of concern, some of which were planned and forecast, and some of which have land on our doorstep with no notice. I think there's probably an opportunity, and going back to your question around the capacity in the Agricultural Council and Network earlier, Matt, to I guess have better dialogue and hopefully alignment on how regionally we can manage and protect industries from different pests, because whilst we have or have not got certain pests here in Australia. That's the same for some of our trading partners, but it is a shared challenge across agriculture and different markets that can affect food security as well. If we're a major source of a particular product into a particular country and we get a pest that reduces that supply, and then they don't have potentially alternate avenues for getting that food for their population, then there probably is an opportunity to whether it's harmonising approach to regulations or whether it's harmonising approach to the management and protection of reducing that particular pest risk, where there is the potential for an incursion that can disrupt food supply. I think that is an opportunity that government should look to explore.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That was it from me, Chair. I just wanted to ask that question.
No problem. Dr. Freelander, have you concluded your line of questioning? Thank you so much. Look, Mr. Kidd, Ms. Gregg, thank you so much for your time and expertise in giving evidence to the committee today, and more broadly, your energy and enthusiasm for your sector. You haven't been asked for any additional information, but we will send you a copy of your transcript to correct any errors that may have been made. Thank you so much for your time and contributing to the inquiry.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Excellent.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, colleagues, and thank you, Bill and Secretariat and Broadcasting. And I'll now conclude the today's public hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Ta-da now.
Bye.